Wednesday, April 30th. Tomorrow is May Day. Don't worry, we won't be sinking the ship or anything. Anyhow, this is CS 746, and today and tomorrow we're going to do discussions on what to expect on the final exam. So what I've got here on Blackboard is I'd already discussed something earlier, this CS 746 Final A from last spring. And I've gone ahead and added the final from spring 2023 as well for your perusal. And also, I forgot I'd created this because it was 2 years ago, the final exam topics file from 2023 spring. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this up to start with. And of course, in 2023 spring as well, we didn't get to the linear regression before the midterm, so that was on the final. But this is literally going through all the different lessons as they were ordered in that semester and talking about the topics we'd covered on those slides. And I went ahead and for some reason put all this together for everybody as a great study document. I hope it's a great study document. Anyhow, so there's a couple sections here on simple and multiple linear regression, which, you should know this stuff, but don't expect it to be on the final exam. It is going to be on the midterm homework, which I'll post today. Yeah, okay. So anyhow, and then we talked about multiple linear regression models, so on and so forth. And then the first part we got into for the final this year, of course, is variable selection or feature selection. And I actually have a nice outline here talking about filter, wrapper, embedded methods, different kinds. What is the difference between your stopping rules and your forward and backward selection? Went into all the details that you could worry about. Most and least significant variable. These are the things that you need to understand for the final exam for, of course, fall 2023 as well as this semester. Advantages, disadvantages of stepwise selection. I went through ridge regression, least absolute. Just kind of said you need to know when to use each of these, which is more appropriate in which cases. We went into principal component analysis. Talked about the other ways to lower dimensionality, which we're ignoring. We talked about the steps in PCA, the algorithm, step 1 through 7, right? Deriving our data set. We talked about, how PCA improves your model. We went into clustering next. We talked about the different kinds of learning approaches, the distance metrics, the types of clustering algorithms. I'm pretty sure minimal things have changed between 2 semesters or 2 years ago and now in these particular topics. We went into a little more detail then about Lloyd's algorithm and k-means clustering, how to do that. We just did discuss it this year, but didn't go into the gory details. It's useful for you to know that in any case. We talked about stopping criteria. We talked about selecting number of clusters using the elbow method or the scree plot method. We went into the classification. Talked about the types, binary, multi-class, multi-label. We talked about how to evaluate your classification models. The right ways to do it is to look at your, precision recall, maybe your F1 score. And of course, since then I've, added some stuff about, actually there's people that don't think the F1 score is good enough either. So, but that's okay. We won't go into the details on that. It's not crucial for this exam or for this class. We talked about different classification algorithms, how we run naive Bayes. We talked about k-nearest neighbors algorithms, so on and so forth. Support vector machines, lots and lots of information in here. Decision trees, how to do the decision tree, what our metrics are for choosing whether they're good splits, what stopping criteria are, right? We talked about what to do when you use random forest. We talked about how to deal with imbalanced data sets. different things. We talked about other techniques finally, about more, what to do if your imbalanced data set still doesn't work. There are things you can try, and eventually, you run out of things to do and you say, I can't do this task, right? And we've talked in this class about artificial neural networks, which we're not going to put on the final exam. So that's a useful reference for you to go through for your final exam studies to make sure you know what all the different topics are. Now we're going to go ahead and actually go through what the finals looked like. In spring 2023, you see it says here printed final B on this screen, on this slide here. And the final in 2023 was actually online using Blackboard. And it was okay, but we still had to go back and manually grade a lot of stuff. So the first two questions were on linear regression. We talked about the interactions and things like that, which I didn't even cover in this semester's midterm. Question about, what's the number of clusters in here based on this graph? Anybody want to take a guess? It's obviously the answer is 6, right? No. Good. I see a lot of people vehemently shaking their head. What is the right answer? 3, obviously. Yeah, 3. Question 4. What is support vector machine best suited for? Right. And the answer is classification. What is variance inflation factor useful for? Right. And we're looking for multicollinearity is the right answer for that one. When two predictors are highly correlated, which of the following statements is true? And this is about comparing the different kinds of methods in your embedded lasso versus ridge, right? So if they're highly correlated in lasso, you're going to get the two moving toward together, right? So yeah, forget what the answer was on that, but go look at the answers, and we'll come back and discuss this next week if you have any questions about what is the right answer for these. So basically, we're going through here. There's all the questions in the exam. So this was a fairly long online question exam. They're the same kind of questions on our paper exam from last spring, in just in a different order. So you're going to see that same kind of thing again on this semester's exam. So you can tell me if that looks like a hard exam or not now. I think it's going to be an easy one. I think people score pretty well on the final exams that I put together in the, I'll try to be better about not putting confusing nominal ordinal interval ratio and better box plot questions next semester. Yes. So one of the biggest questions on an exam is whether you can make a big question that goes, you do one thing and it's multi-step problem, and the answer is on an exam. I don't think we should do multi-step problems because basically someone makes a mistake in the first step. And the box plot, of course, is a multi-step problem, and I forgot to do it, structure it correctly. So on that's the main thing about the midterm remediation is breaking that apart. Okay, so we talked about the taxonomy of feature selection methods. We already done that. There will be questions on PCA on the final exam. And of course, it might not be calculating the mean vector on different exams. It's different questions. So you can probably expect that we'll be looking at, here's the mean vector. Here's, our individual vectors. What are the, what are the differences, right? Calculate the differences from the mean vector there. Something like that, right? PCA, and of course we've seen this stuff before. We might have a question where we say arrange these steps in PCA in the correct order, with some of the steps missing. So you need to know what order the steps are in doing your PCA algorithm, or whatever. And then down here, of course, we'll have something very similar to this with different values that we have listed for the equations. So recognize what those mean, understand those equations. Do I have that in the topics from 2023? There's our distance metrics and the I do not have the table in that from 2 semesters or 2 years ago. So you'll need to find that in the lecture slides for yourself, what the differences are. And of course, it's in there. You know where it is, right? Okay. So that's basically my recommendation to you for preparing for the final exam is go over these files, work on this over the weekend. If you have any questions, go ahead and email them to me, copy Hardik and Ajay on that request. If there's anything that's unclear, otherwise we will come back Monday morning and we'll share all the questions that people might have at that time. So we can do our final preparation for the final. So it should be pretty straightforward and easy final compared especially to the midterm. Okay. I do want to point out that, yeah, we'll try to do this, make up homework to get some points back. If you don't get large chunks of points back on the midterm, remember the final costs more on your grade and the project costs more on your grade than the midterm. So, you know, you're not necessarily out of luck. Still, if you did poorly on the midterm, just make sure you do well on the final. All right. Are there any questions at this point, either in the classroom or I don't see, yeah, I see a few people online or on online attendance. If not, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording session at this point, and then we can have open discussion of whatever people want to talk about. And I might just go sit down after a few minutes and start working on things for the ADS class final as well. Okay, so I'll go ahead and end the recording.